Ethan Price walked into Target wearing a red hoodie. Marcus Bell followed 10 minutes later dressed as a delivery man. To shoppers, they were strangers in the crowd, but within 30 minutes, they'd orchestrate one of the most calculated heists the town had ever seen without a single weapon, without a single word, and without leaving a trace. This is the story of how chaos erupted in the most ordinary place, and how two men used fear, fire, and silence to vanish with over $1 million. The Target in Maple Ridge looked no different that Sunday. Rows of cars shimmered under the afternoon sun, shopping carts rolled smoothly across asphalt, and families bustled in and out with red bags and receipts in hand. Inside, the air conditioning hummed steadily, masking the subtle chatter and beeping scanners at checkout. Cameras captured it all: routine, uneventful, quiet. The kind of day no one would remember. But 2:36 p.m. marked the first crack in that illusion. A black SUV coasted silently into the lot, parking far from the entrance near a light pole where cameras barely reached. It didn't draw attention. There were no loud engines or suspicious movements. It just sat there, engine idling, windows up. 10 minutes passed. Then the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a red hoodie pulled low, dark jeans, and a baseball cap that shadowed his face. A customer, perhaps. One of hundreds. He didn't grab a cart or basket. He walked through the sliding glass doors with both hands in his pockets, his pace slow, like someone browsing with time to kill. His eyes moved quickly, but not toward products. He glanced at ceiling corners, watching where the cameras swiveled. Most shoppers were too busy with their own tasks to notice him. A mom compared cereal prices. A teenager tested headphones at the demo wall. Near the front, two employees leaned against the customer service counter, talking about weekend plans. Nothing seemed out of place. No one was on edge. That was the genius of it all. While the man moved quietly through the home goods section, something else happened. The break room clock ticked toward 2:50 p.m. A pair of employees wrapped up their lunch, wiped their hands, and returned to their stations. One of them would later tell investigators how peaceful everything felt that afternoon, how the only unusual thing was a flickering light in aisle 14 that had been ignored for days. What no one noticed was that at the same time, a device behind the scenes had started interfering with motion sensors in 3 key locations of the store: the side hallway, the storage bay, and the electronics back wall. The Target system had built-in security redundancies, but no one had flagged them. After all, the alarms didn't go off. There were no breaches logged. On paper, it was just another low-traffic Sunday. At 2:51 p.m., the man in the hoodie turned sharply and made his way to the back of the store. He paused near the double doors that led to the employees-only area and checked his phone. He didn't enter. He just waited there for a few seconds, then walked off. On camera, the moment looked like a customer confused about where to go. But that hesitation wasn't random. He was checking timing, checking movement, because he wasn't working alone. And someone dressed very differently was just minutes away from stepping inside to join him. At exactly 3:07 p.m., the second figure entered the store. He wore a standard delivery uniform: blue polo shirt, name tag, clipboard in hand. The name on the tag didn't match anyone on staff, and his delivery wasn't scheduled. But no one questioned him. It was common for drop-ins to happen, especially near shift changes. The man moved with practiced ease, nodding politely to a cashier and heading straight for the back. What set him apart, though, was what he didn't carry. No packages, no scanner. Just a thin black duffel slung over one shoulder that no one paid attention to. He didn't go straight to the warehouse. Instead, he veered off toward the electronics section. At 3:10 p.m., he crouched down near the gaming display, shielding himself behind a row of box consoles. Security cameras caught his outline briefly before the feed glitched. Later reviews showed that this exact frame was lost during a strange network disruption. The glitch lasted only 30 seconds. But in that small gap, 3 camera feeds, including the ones covering the main entrance, stockroom hallway, and rear, all cut out. That interruption, subtle and unalarming to anyone in the store, effectively blinded the system at a crucial moment. While he remained low near the electronics, the man in the hoodie was circling again. This time, he walked slowly past the baby supplies aisle, then paused by a rack of diapers. He pretended to look at sizes, shifting a package slightly before pulling something from his pocket. It appeared to be a small shopping list or maybe a phone, but when zoomed in on later, footage revealed something far more chilling. A small, flat device, likely a timer, was tucked behind the packaging. Nestled deep, it was invisible to anyone casually browsing. Meanwhile, the store moved on. A manager called for more change at register 3. A toddler cried over a denied toy. A couple debated between brands of dog food. On the surface, nothing felt off, but under the calm, both strangers were following a timeline down to the minute. The fake delivery man repositioned himself slightly, kneeling as if tying a shoelace. With his clipboard tilted upward, he activated something on a touch screen inside it. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but nearby access panels began receiving scrambled signals. A store associate passed by and offered to help. The man nodded without speaking and stood, moving slowly toward the front registers. He stopped just short of them, placing himself near the fire alarm panel. At the same time, Target's local server registered a temporary disconnection from corporate security. It was brief, under 1 minute, but enough to cause a sync delay between in-store cameras and the central archive system. This delay meant that, even if someone were watching live footage, they would miss roughly 45 seconds of real-time activity. And that was all it would take. The men weren't there to rob customers or damage property. They were mapping movement, disabling visibility, and preparing for a distraction so sharp and sudden that it would make everything else around it look like chaos. At 3:19 p.m., an alert silently triggered in the system's back end, flagged as a minor electrical hiccup. In reality, it was a deliberate signal planted days earlier. The timer device, now ticking behind the diaper aisle, had begun its final countdown. 8 minutes. The man in the hoodie was already gone from that section, weaving now through aisles near seasonal decor. He no longer looked at shelves or products. He kept his eyes up, tracking cameras, avoiding open sightlines. His posture was different, to no longer casual, now fast, controlled. The man in the delivery uniform repositioned again, moving closer to the front exits. He passed the registers without glancing at anyone, then turned toward a service door that led to the building's access panel. Tucked inside his duffel was a compact signal jammer, specially modified. It didn't block phone service or Wi-Fi in a wide radius that would have drawn suspicion. Instead, it sent short bursts of static directly into the automatic door controls, corrupting their sync function for just over a minute. He activated it, then stepped away, pulling his phone from his pocket and pretending to scroll. On the surface, he was just another customer waiting near the exit, but the front doors were now sealed in place, not locked, but frozen. At 3:20 p.m., an elderly woman approached the door and found it slow to respond. It opened eventually after she waved her hand near the sensor twice. She didn't think much of it. No one did. That minor delay was the only outward sign that anything was wrong. Across the store, employees remained unaware. A junior associate was helping a customer find replacement batteries. A manager was signing off on a return. 2 kids played near a mirror in the clothing section. Inside the break room, someone was microwaving leftovers, laughing at a video on their phone. The loudest sound in the building was a commercial playing on a display TV in the electronics department. The man in the hoodie had vanished from cameras by then, last seen entering a staff-only hallway near the back. His image blurred as he stepped past the lens. Seconds later, the hallway camera froze again, same as before. At 3:25 p.m., the store's internal Wi-Fi glitched a second time. This one lasted just 10 seconds. It was long enough for both intruders to finalize their positions. The man near the front pressed a button on his device. In the back, the timer reached the 2-minute mark. Smoke began to seep slowly from the back of the diaper aisle, creeping between boxes and drifting upward, too faint for alarms to detect right away. A child was the first to notice. She tugged at her mother's arm and pointed. Her mother looked and narrowed her eyes but assumed it was just dust or maybe a spill. Still, she told an employee, who walked off to investigate. By 3:26 p.m., the man in uniform was already walking calmly toward the emergency side exit. He would be gone within 60 seconds. The man in the hoodie was gone. The device ticked down 1 minute, 30 seconds. No one was ready. At 3:30 p.m., the silence broke. A sharp crack echoed from the back of the store, loud enough to make heads turn but not so violent as to cause structural damage. Smoke burst outward from the diaper aisle, thick and gray, spreading fast through the ventilation. Customers screamed. A few ran toward the front. The fire alarm kicked in 3 seconds later, and sprinklers followed almost immediately, drenching merchandise, tile floors, and anyone standing beneath the spray. What had started as a quiet afternoon turned chaotic in an instant. Panic surged through the building. Shoppers scrambled, clutching children and pushing carts aside. Many headed straight for the front doors, only to find them unresponsive. The automatic sensors failed to open. One woman slammed her shoulder into the glass, yelling for help. A man yanked at the emergency release lever beside the exit, but nothing happened. The system wasn't locked, it was paralyzed. Behind them, the smoke was growing darker. The back of the store looked like it was folding in on itself. In electronics, water poured onto exposed cords. Sparks jumped from a monitor. Shelves rattled as people shoved past, slipping on the wet tile. The loudspeaker system activated, broadcasting a recorded emergency protocol, but the words were barely audible under the shrieking alarms. In the confusion, no one saw the man in the delivery uniform slip out the side emergency hatch, his jacket now inside his duffel, his name tag left behind on a shelf. He walked calmly toward the road behind the store, where a nondescript van sat waiting with its engine running. Inside, employees tried to maintain control. A shift supervisor herded people toward the emergency exits. A teenager dropped their phone while running and got separated from their group. A mother tried to carry both her children at once, slipping on the soaked floor. It took another full minute before someone in the security booth managed to trigger a manual override on the doors. When they finally opened, the rush of people was frantic. Outside, customers poured into the parking lot, coughing, crying, shouting. Some sat on the curb, soaked and shaking. Others kept moving, desperate to get distance between themselves and the smoke now trailing from the roof vents. Fire engines arrived within 5 minutes, followed by police. The building wasn't collapsing, and the fire hadn't spread. In fact, it was mostly confined to a single aisle, but the fear had already taken hold. First responders entered cautiously, expecting a much larger blaze, but the smoke was already thinning. Sprinklers had done most of the job. What remained was the aftermath: scattered carts, drenched shelves, and one burning question: why had the doors failed? Store managers began accounting for their staff. No fatalities, no serious injuries, just a store gutted by fear. At first glance, it looked like a fire scare or an accident. But once the smoke cleared and investigators walked the aisles, it became obvious that something much more deliberate had happened. The fire was just the surface. The real crime had already vanished into the smoke. Investigators combed through the wreckage for hours. Most of the store had been spared any real damage, except for the baby supplies aisle where the fire had started. The scorched remains of a diaper shelf marked the center of the explosion, but there were no signs of a gas leak or electrical fault. It was quickly ruled out as accidental. The fire had a clear point of origin and had been started with a chemical accelerant. That much was certain, but the motive remained unclear. No money was taken from the registers, no customers had been robbed, and there had been no visible suspects once the store was cleared. It wasn't until later that evening, when the inventory team ran a standard scan, that something strange emerged. An entire pallet of electronics was missing, specifically high-value items like tablets, smartwatches, and gaming consoles. Over $1.2 million worth of merchandise had vanished from the storage room. Yet, there were no signs of forced entry. The cameras covering the warehouse entrance had glitched during the fire alarm. The scan logs had been manually edited, rerouting inventory records to make it look like the shipment had never arrived. But it had, and it was gone. This changed everything. The fire had been a diversion, a calculated distraction that allowed someone to move freely through the stockroom while everyone else was fleeing the building. Investigators reviewed every second of footage, cross-referencing timestamps and customer movements. That's when they saw him, the delivery man who had arrived with no scheduled drop-off. He appeared on 6 different cameras before vanishing completely just minutes before the fire. He never left through the front. His exit path traced to a rarely used emergency hatch, one that wasn't covered by surveillance. The hoodie-wearing man appeared too, caught briefly in a hallway camera, then never seen again. His path suggested he had planted the device, triggered the countdown, and left before alarms went off. No fingerprints were recovered. The red hoodie was found discarded in a trash bin outside, soaked in soda and ash to mask any trace DNA. Security logs showed that someone had used a wireless device to scramble the door's software, explaining why no one could escape during the fire. The two men had executed a coordinated heist, timing it down to the second. While customers panicked and employees fought to regain control, they had pulled off a theft so precise it left almost no trail. Even more unsettling, they hadn't taken anything irreplaceable, just merchandise that could be quickly resold, difficult to trace, and easy to move. Authorities suspected an organized group, possibly responsible for similar incidents in other cities. But no matches were ever found. The van seen behind the store never showed up again. The serial numbers from the stolen electronics were entered into national databases, but none resurfaced. The crime was never solved. The Target reopened a month later with updated security protocols and stronger fire detection systems, but the mystery remained. How two men turned a normal Sunday into chaos, stealing over $1 million without ever brandishing a weapon or making a threat. All it took was precision, timing, and the willingness to turn panic into opportunity.